Hello, my name's Gavin, and this is Genre Books. When I was doing the Victober booktube event and putting together a Project Gutenberg reading list, I kept finding books by Victorian authors, but books weren't eligible for Victober because they were actually written in the decade after Victoria's death. The Edwardian period, some interpretations can take it from 1880 to 1914. I'm trying to stick with the more rigid actual time Edward was on the throne, 1901 to 1910, so only 9 years. However, there's a couple of books here which came out in 1911 but were written in 1910. I've kept those in. There's more than you think in a 9-year period, and this nearly became 2 videos. I might still yet make a second video at a later date, but I picked 50. The concession I've made this time that I didn't in the Victober video is there are more popular works here that I'm including. For Victober, I figured it's news to no one that Charles Dickens, Wilkie Collins, the Brontes are available. I'm getting rid of that stipulation this time round. Another stipulation I'm dispensing with is that they need to be English or Irish. The majority of them still are, but there are a few Americans in this list as well. This is not a list rigidly set into genres, although there are some loose groupings as the ideas occurred to me. But we'll start with ghost stories, horror stories, tales of the weird, and to prove that I'm not shying away from the big names, I'm starting with M.R. James' Ghost Stories of an Antiquary. This includes probably his most famous story, Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Boy. John Silent's Physician Extraordinary is the occult detective of Algernon Blackwood. And there are a couple of his collections on Gutenberg. John Silent's Physician Extraordinary is the one I'm sticking with. William Hope Hodgson. There are a few works I could have chosen for this, including probably his most famous, The Nightland, but I'm going with The House on the Borderland. For Bram Stoker, I absolutely can't choose his most famous work. Dracula was 1899, so 2 years the wrong side of the Edwardian age. However, I can use The Lair of the White Worm, so that's the one I've plumped for. For Oliver Onions, there's more than one genre I could have chosen him for, but I think he is most famous for his ghost stories and probably his most famous collection, Widdershins, is available on Project Gutenberg. Some Haunted Houses, sometimes known as Some Haunted Houses of England, is a collection of retellings from Elliot O'Donnell. The Isles of Sunset is a ghost story collection from A.C. Benson, so Arthur Christopher Benson, who's probably, I would say, most famous for writing the lyrics to Land of Hope and Glory. Another Arthur Machen, probably The Three Impostors, is his most famous story, but the one I've chosen here is The Hill of Dreams. W. Jacobs, I think W. Jacobs is The Monkey's Paw. This is his most famous story. Here is an early collection from him, Some Sailor's Knots, again ghost stories. And for the last of the ghost type stories, Mary Corelli, who started in the Victorian era but was still churning out work in the Edwardian age, The Strange Visitation. Another popular late Victorian genre, which is still going strong in the Edwardian era, is the detective story. The Hound of the Baskervilles by Arthur Conan Doyle. So Sherlock Holmes is still with us, and I'm not leaving the Hound of the Baskervilles off this list. We also have R. Austin Freeman and John Thorndyke's cases. There are a couple of John Thorndyke's collections on Project Gutenberg. This is the one I've chosen. I think it may have had two different titles in England and America. I can't remember the other title, but I think on Project Gutenberg it's under John Thorndyke's cases. The Problem of Cell 13 is a detective story by Jacques Futrelle, who was very famous at the time, died on the Titanic, so no stories after 1912. A few historical fiction pieces now. The Fifth Queen by Madox is a story of life in Henry VIII's court. The French Revolution is the backdrop for Baroness Orczy's The Scarlet Pimpernel, and a slightly more nebulous time, but a lower social strata than the nobility of the French Revolution, in Mary Trombley's The Lowest Rung. A couple of poetry collections. It allows me to get Thomas Hardy into the list. Poems from the Past and Present, I think 1906, but yes, the novels may already have been written in the Victorian era, but he's still producing work in the Edwardian era. And an early collection from John Masefield, who went on to become Poet Laureate. This is Saltwater Ballads. And whilst I'm looking at things that aren't novels, let's do a play. George Bernard Shaw, Man and Superman. L.T. Mead, probably better known now as a writer of ghost stories, was also a prolific children's author and popularised the style of story of girls away at boarding school. The Rebel of the School is a story I've chosen for this list. J.M. Barrie and a Peter Pan story, Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. I don't feel I need to introduce Peter Pan to anybody. Beatrix Potter, again, an author I don't think I need to introduce to anybody, but I've chosen The Tale of Jemima Puddleduck, and I've also chosen Kenneth Graham's The Wind in the Willows. Science fiction is still going strong in the first decade of the 1900s, although I think we're still calling it scientific romances at this point. M.P. Shiel, The Purple Cloud. William the Q's The Invasion of 1910. This is a foretelling. This is a story about the near future. It's written in 1906. It's about 1910, and it's about a war between England and Germany. So he's only 4 years out. And it's pretty much a plea for Britain to really start ramping up its arms production. Stories of British society being taken over, either from within or from an outside influence, were quite popular at the time. Ernest Brammer, who is better known for his Kai Lung stories, gives us The Secret of the League. And R.H. Benson, Robert Hugh Benson, younger brother of Arthur Christopher Benson, mentioned earlier, also better known as a ghost story writer, gave us this religiously tinged science fiction, Lord of the World. As he was a Jesuit priest, I think you could probably forgive him his religious background to the tale. George Griffith, or George Chetwynd Griffith Jones, gives us The World Master. Samuel Butler brings a sequel to Erewhon, his novel from the 1860s, 1870s, and brings us Erewhon Revisited. Edwin Lester Arnold, whom I had assumed was American but was British, and with the story that became we think, heavy influence on Edgar Rice Burroughs when writing A Princess of Mars, Lieutenant Gulliver Jones, His Vacation, later called Gulliver of Mars. And I'm not leaving a list of science fiction without adding an H.G. Wells. The big novels, many of the big novels, have by this point been written. The Time Machine, The War of the Worlds. Here is The Food of the Gods and How They Came to Earth. It's a hop, skip and a jump from science fiction to fantasy, and something which is more of a children's fantasy, Edith Nesbit, known for The Railway Children, 5 Children and It, and ghost stories, naturally. This is The Enchanted Castle. Not a true fantasy, but with fantastical elements. The Exiles of Fallu by the fantastically named Barry Payne, Lord Dunsany and the Gods of Pegana, and another Payne, this time The Angel of Pain, by E.F. Benson. Another Benson brother, the middle Benson brother, Edward Frederick Benson, best known to everyone as Fred, and by far the most successful of the writers. For a bit of comedy, we have Max Beerbohm and Zuleika Dobson, which is a satire on Oxford University life, and comedy par excellence from P.G. Wodehouse, Smith in the City. I never knew quite how to pronounce Smith. I think it's a silent P. 3 Weeks from Eleanor Glynn was a bit of a controversy at the time. She was a bit of a controversial figure at the time, with some fairly indiscreet affairs with some fairly high up people. This book was seen as erotic fiction. I would temper your expectations with our jaded 21st century palates, but racy for the time. Eden Philpotts was a prolific author at the time, and I've chosen the novel The American Prisoner, which, as the title suggests, is set on Dartmoor. A novel which has had, I don't know how many, cinema retellings. It's been a while since I've seen one, maybe out of fashion now, but a perennial story for a number of years. The Four Feathers from A.E.W. Mason. And a character whose name has probably outlived the popularity of the character and the stories. Raffles. Raffles, the gentleman thief, the amateur cracksman and cricketer. A Thief in the Night from E.W. Hornung. More adventure with Guy Boothby and the Kidnapped President. An American author, famous in the late Victorian era, continuing here, Edith Wharton and Sanctuary. Another American author who lived quite a lot of his life in Britain, Henry James and the Wings of the Dove, and famously voted greatest ever Briton by people who tend to forget that he is half American, Winston Churchill and My African Journey. I'll follow that up with a Scotsman who became famous in Canada for his Northwest romantic writings, Robert W. Service and The Trail of 98. And to continue our globe-trotting, a writer from Poland for whom English was, I think, second or at least second if not third language, Joseph Conrad and Nostromo. The Mystics by Catherine Cecil Thurston. D.H. Lawrence with The White Peacock. I did stretch the dates on this. This book was published in 1911, but the title page of the first edition said 1910, so I'm counting it. And finishing with E.M. Forster, my favourite of his books, The Longest Journey. So that is a whistle-stop tour of a very busy decade. I may come back to the Edwardian era. There are no book events for Edwardian literature. I don't think Edwardian fits into any month, either rhyming or alliteratively. I will list all of the books and authors below and link to Project Gutenberg. I won't link every single work, I'll be here all day. But they're all available. If you're doing a read what you own challenge and you can't buy any books, this is a good way around it. if just in general you don't want to spend lots of money on books, you've got everything you need there, from westerns or frontier literature through to science fiction and fantasy. If, like me, you found out about the BookTube event resurrecting the old tradition of Christmas ghost stories after you'd started your Read What You Own challenge, Project Gutenberg is a godsend. Even if a book I download I can't count towards my 100 books. But The Old Nurse's Story from Elizabeth Gaskell is on Gutenberg as well. In fact, you could read ghost stories all the way through December and never have to buy a single thing. Everything you need for a proper ghostly Christmas is on Project Gutenberg. But until next time,